I thought tonight it would be interesting to talk about some things that maybe you've heard about but are a little bit unclear, or maybe you've heard and you have adopted into your language, but maybe we can create a little bit more depth there. Because what we say in the New York City Fair Trade Coalition is we're trying to push the sustainable fashion movement. And what that means is you constantly have to keep teaching yourself, you constantly have to question your ethics and keep pushing the goals forward, because there are a lot of people and things out there that are taking advantage of, you know, slick marketing. I'm sure we've all fallen prey to a sustainable thing that maybe later on we found out wasn't so sustainable. So hopefully I get to dig through some of these myths today. So I'm just gonna jump right in. So myth number one, you cannot be sustainable. You can only be more sustainable. So this idea of sustainability, I put the definition down there. So able to endure without interruption or without failing for the long-term future. So any company that says we're sustainable doesn't really know what they're talking about, because sustainability is never done. It's never achieved. You always have to push and you can always do better. So we can look at a company that maybe is using cotton only, but the cotton has a lot of pesticides, a lot of chemicals. So maybe they switched to organic cotton, but then we realize that the cotton is being moved from one part of the country to another country before it reaches us. So maybe the transportation isn't so sustainable. And I could go in for hours talking about supply chains and how our things are made and how complex that is. But with that complexity means there's always problems and issues that we can dig into and solve and create a new business potentially, right? I always say every problem is a potential business. You can find solutions for it. Okay, so next. So sustainability is more than saving the environment. A lot of people connect sustainability just with the environment and, you know, trees and nature, but sustainability, we actually talk about the triple bottom line. So if there's one terminology that I want you to include into your vocabulary now is the triple bottom line. I tell my students all the time, I'm gonna get a triple bottom line tattoo right on my bicep someday. So triple bottom line is the idea that the traditional bottom line is profit, right? Businesses only care about making money, but we want to change company culture to, they have to also care about people and they have to care about the planet, so the environment. So meaning that every single business decision that I make, I need to consider the social implications. Am I treating my workers fairly? Are they able to afford the basic needs for their families? Am I taking advantage of them? Then we also need to consider the environmental implications. We extract things from the earth all the time, right? Cotton we're taking from the earth. Oil we're taking from the earth. We need to make sure that we're doing that in a responsible way, and what we're putting back into the earth, so trash, garbage, pollutants, we're also considering those implications. So keeping in mind that this triple bottom line, it works together. And once again, I could go probably for hours talking about the beloved triple bottom line. Okay, so the next myth is, so often we think that recycling is the answer, right? If we can just recycle, then everything will be fine. But in reality, our recycling system doesn't work that well. And I hate to say that a very small percentage of plastics can be recycled with the system that we have right now. If anybody is interested in learning more about this, there's a documentary on PBS Frontline. I'm sorry, I'm a big PBS Frontline nerd, talking about recycling and more myths behind recycling. But to turn it away from plastic and more towards our clothing habits, so 13 million tons of textiles are thrown away each year. So that is a lot of textile that is going into the landfill. And either A, not composting, right? If it's made of synthetics, or it is composting, and it's not, it takes a long time for that to happen. And who knows what dyes or chemicals are going into that, you know, landfill, which runs off into water and all those things. So within this little side, we have 5 ways to build a more ethical closet. So we talk a lot about taking good care of the things that we own. So instead of just paying attention to recycling, we also need to pay attention to the other two: reduce and reuse. So reducing how much stuff we buy by buying things that are better, higher quality, and then reusing things. So maybe mending the clothing that we have, you know, especially our shoes. Shoes are something that I'm always taking to the cobbler, something that's kind of dying off, unfortunately, because I want to continue to love my shoes forever. I don't want to throw them into the landfill. So there are some other tips there as well. So the 4th myth is, so often we think natural is always better. Natural is always better. I hate to say it, but there's often not a better or a worse. There is just different and trade-offs. So here we can see cotton takes about 10,000 liters of water to produce 1 kilo of cotton fabric. That is a lot of water. Whether you are irrigating crops, or once you pick the cotton and you have to wash it, or once you knit it into fabric, then you need to, our beloved distressed jeans, right? We love jeans with holes in them that are sandblasted. Those things take a lot of water. But then polyester, more than 70 million barrels of oil used each year to produce polyester. So those are the bad things, but there's the flip side to it, right? The good things. So I'm going to use the example of my leggings. I once upon a time bought these fair trade cotton leggings. I was so happy. I was supporting a friend's brand. You know, I spent more than I would usually spend. And within a year, those leggings started to get little holes in them, whether it was from washing or all my biking, as I've talked to you about already. So I was bummed that I spent more money and it was only going to last me a year. So what I decided to do was, I'm a big fan of secondhand clothing. So I went on this website, ThredUp, and ThredUp, I searched Nike leggings, and I got Nike leggings that were made from recycled plastic bottles, right? Recycled polyester. So I bought those, and those are probably going to last me 15, 20 years. Those are a little indestructible. I'm not sure if any of you have had those kind of leggings, especially a brand like Nike that really stands behind its products. It was something that I could, I felt, you know, that it was a good investment there. But I could go around and around in circles talking about the negative sides of polyester and the negative sides of cotton and the positives. So at the end of the day, what it really comes down to, we had an event recently talking about exactly this, natural versus synthetic. And it really depends on what kind of garment you have. You know, maybe my denim jean jacket, maybe an organic cotton one that's going to last a long time is going to be a good investment. Something that maybe, you know, a dress that's polyester that I'm going to wear for one, you know, season for springtime and get rid of it, maybe that's not a good enough, you know, reason to buy that outfit if it's just going to end up in a landfill somewhere. So I know a lot of sustainable shoppers can go down the rabbit hole of trying to decide what's better. And the more I talk about it, the more I think we need to help them make some sort of quiz or checklist to help make some of these decisions, because it's difficult. And the last myth that I wanted to talk about is greenwashing. So greenwashing is this idea that a company claims to be doing things, and maybe they're doing some of them, but they're not as good as they're projecting to be. And this is something that I see happening more and more, is that customers smell this BS a mile away. You have all been over marketed to. You've been marketed to your entire life. So the idea that somebody's going to tell you we're empowering people, or we're a conscious collection, or we're transparent, you're not just going to take them for their word. You're going to do a little bit of research. You're a little bit skeptical now. And that's how we have to be, unfortunately, because a lot of companies, they will say, for every item sold, we're giving a pair to a child in need somewhere else, right? We all know Tom's Shoes. So Tom's Shoes did that. And what we didn't realize was that that's actually dumping. So they're taking a bunch of shoes, bringing them to a country. And what about the person who made shoes? What about the cobbler? You just killed their industry, killed their job. So there's this misconception of doing good. Just because you're doing good doesn't mean you're having the intended effect. So we have to look at things in a really dynamic, nuanced way, which is not easy at all. So to kind of wrap up, in general, my message to you is that we have to be critical. We have to not buy into everything that brands are saying, but at the same time, we have to have hope and reward the brands for doing some sort of good, for trying to do better. Because if you're looking for problems within a brand, you're always going to find them, right? Going back to the beginning of the presentation, there's no sustainable. There's always more sustainable. And I love this quote by Stella McCartney. I'm not sure if many of you knew, but she is a leader within the sustainable fashion movement and has done a lot of work to push this forward. And you can all read the quote. So the starting point is not design. The starting point is sustainability. So I'm happy now if anybody has any thoughts, feelings, opinions. I know I threw a lot at you, but I hope that was helpful in some sort of way. So you guys can chat in the chat, or you can unmute and ask a question, whatever your pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I think that everybody by now are just basically asking. So we've seen actually this year the rise of Real. Does anybody ever shop at Real? Has anyone shopped at Real?
Yeah.
Yeah, Melissa, ciao. Yeah, I mean, we saw the rise of the Real, no? And we think, okay, oh my God, it's so expensive, but it's actually, it's almost something new, and you can actually buy good stuff and somehow be sustainable, no? I mean, rather than buy new stuff, which is actually made by polyester anyway, no? I mean, for so much for the price, only because it's fashionable, we find an healthy way to buy item that somehow we want it to the lower price, and somehow helping the environment, no?
I agree. I think, sorry if I chime in, I think the second-hand luxury market is definitely taking on a very, very positive impact in the last few years. I think before that, it definitely had a more of a negative connotation, but companies like The Real, like Poshmark, so on and so forth, have definitely brought a more positive spin towards it. And yeah, I like shopping there.
Let me ask you guys, does anybody feel some sort of way now with secondhand clothing with COVID-19? I'm curious if that's going to change any perspective, especially, if you're going to go into a store, maybe even not a secondhand, but going into a store and trying on clothing there. Do you guys think you'll have any nervousness or reservations about that?
No. Hi guys. Ciao,
Hi.
Camila.
Ciao.
No, actually, I live in Dallas, Texas, and actually I went to a second store today, and the way they did it, they just steam all the garments.
Awesome.
And as soon as you walked in, they give you hand sanitizer, and we were all required to wear a mask. So I don't think so, and I don't think anybody goes and shops secondhand and then not wash it before they wear it.
Yeah.
So I don't think there is an issue with that. At least I didn't have any issue with it. Not at all. I think it actually makes it better.
How many cases did you have in Dallas?
I think like 10,000, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's very low. But it's also geographically, you know, we're very spread out. We have a lot of land, and everywhere you go, you're required to drive. You know, people don't walk around. So it's a bit different than the situation in New York or in big cities.
I think it will be interesting. I'm glad to hear that you weren't put off to go to a secondhand store, because I would hate for all the movement we made, right? Like somebody was saying it used to be something that was not kosher, and I would hate to go back on that, and everybody needs everything, you know, in a plastic bag, protected, never have been touched, because that creates a lot of waste too.
Hi, it's Alyssa. So coming from a seller's perspective, I sell a lot of stuff on Poshmark clothing, and I've actually seen an uptick in my sales since COVID started, mainly because everything is closed and people are looking, where can I buy clothes that are affordable, that'll come fast shipping, that are still cute, you know? So me personally, I'm not afraid of the virus anywhere, but I've seen an uptick in sales on used clothes, just from my selling perspective.
I think I had some people in the Fair Trade Coalition who also saw upticks on their Etsy shops. And I think it's because during this time, people wanted to support real humans, right? Like I would rather give you some money than give it to like Gap or something, right? I would rather try and have that more human connection during this hard time.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense as well. That makes sense.
And
can I just give a recommendation of a book that talks all about this? And I think the book was written in like 1970 something. It's called The Millionaire Next Door, and they have a whole chapter on why you should always buy secondhand clothing. So when people tend to think why, oh, this is uncomfortable, whatever, you know, because they maybe are uncomfortable with the whole idea of not the cleanliness part, but maybe what they think people are going to think about them. I always think it's interesting that the whole chapter was dedicated to that in this book. So
you bring up an interesting point. You know, growing up, my father, he sews. He made my mom's wedding dress, actually. So that was something we always went to the secondhand store, bought things, tore it up, and made things that were new. So that was like a very like nostalgic thing to me. But the psychological part, you know, if you grew up where you only had access to secondhand, I can see you not wanting secondhand because you're an adult now and you can buy your own new things. So yeah, I'll have to check out that book, but it's interesting. I'm sure that book has so many other gems that we knew about in the 70s, and we're still fucking shit up. And it's sad.
What was the book called? What was it called?
the book is called, it's a very famous book, The Millionaire Next Door. So it gives you a lot of ways how you can become wealthy and what wealthy people do and how they accumulate wealth. And a lot of it is through, you know, never buy a vehicle that's 100% new, so you can cut the depreciation. The other one is about the new clothes. One gentleman, but I remember, I read it a long time ago, but he talks about the new suit. And he's like, I'll either buy a used suit that's like a expensive 3,000 plus suit, or I'll never go. And I think his like maximum was like 700 or 300. I don't remember exactly, but there's a whole chapter dedicated to the purchasing of you know, used clothing, used items.
And it's interesting now because we're almost like ripe for being able to wear secondhand clothing and it not being a status thing, because we see so many very, very wealthy people dressing like us, right? Once upon a time, people who were very wealthy dressed a very different way because, you know, they weren't doing traditional work that we do. And especially, I had a call earlier talking about, because of this situation, how many of us are willing to go back to uncomfortable clothing? Like, we've been very comfortable for a long time now. I don't know if many of you, I'm sure you all know Tim Gunn. He had an interview, and even he was talking about, he's like, I put on a suit and I had to take it off after 15 minutes because I was so uncomfortable. And it's like, our standards of what we're willing to put our body through because of the past couple of months, I think have changed. And I think that's a really interesting thing for anyone who's going to make and sell clothing.
And Andrea, I think you touched a very interesting point, which was that people now are trying to help the small businesses, but I think we're all trying to stop buying items that were made in China and in other countries where we know they weren't made with integrity. I grew up with that. Both my parents are clothing designers in Mexico City. So talking to my parent, he told me that his business was doing really well because everybody was trying to avoid shopping abroad. They were trying to help their own communities. So I think that's helping a lot.
Yeah, it's also interesting. I don't want to get too much into the like global aspect to it, but the call I was on earlier, we were talking about global sourcing and how many of, we're hoping that during this lockdown where you've been stuck in your country or a country and not being able to escape to somewhere else, I think all of us stuck in our homes, at some point we had to look within ourselves. And we're hoping that those countries also do the same. So maybe they're going to increase their domestic production and want to buy, you know, if you're from India, buy India. If you're from Poland, buy Poland, to help stimulate and support your economy. So that will have really interesting implications if we're not relying so much on global trade. Because, I mean, I'm curious how many orders we're placing for fall. I hear a lot. I hear we're still continuing to order things from China, but who knows how many people are going to be buying those things. And we know that China is certainly making a lot of things and has a large customer base there for them to sell to. So it'll be interesting to see what domestic markets, how they kind of act within. Anybody else have any other questions or thoughts on any of the stuff that I went through?
I have an opinion. I think this health crisis just makes me want to make healthier decisions, because if we continue doing things irresponsibly, harming the environment, who knows what next virus can come out, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm hoping that people connect these dots. You know, people still question, how did this virus get to us? And so, you know, there are diseases all around the world that we have not come in contact with, right, as humans. But as we cut down more trees, as we invade more of this planet, then we can come in contact with these viruses. And that's how they transmit from animals to people. So we have to make sure that we protect some lands, that we have to protect these areas, because by reaching further and further out, we're just putting ourselves at further risk, which is kind of Mother Nature taking over and balancing things out a little bit, right? It feels all that way to us, I think, in some granular level. That's hard to process sometimes.